Welcome to the Over the Hump Podcast, your gateway to the world of the iconic Brahman breed of cattle. At BRC Ranch, our passion for Brahman cattle runs deep. Join us as we delve into the heart of this extraordinary breed, unveiling its rich history, exploring industry trends, and sharing captivating stories that define the American Brahman. BRC Ranch stands as the pinnacle of Brahman excellence in America, boasting a decade-long legacy of champions and housing the finest Brahman bulls worldwide. It's not just about cattle, it's about a legacy that reverberates across ranches and hearts. Brought to you by BRC Ranch, where the Brahman legacy thrives and stories are woven into the very fabric of ranching. This is Over the Hump. And now your hosts, Brendan Cutrer, Rachel Cutrer, and Keaton Dodd.
Welcome to another episode of Over the Hump Podcast. In today's episode, you'll be hearing from me, Brandon, and Keaton about lots of stories about Noble 458/7, one of the most popular herd sires of the Brahman breed and a mainstay of the BRC bull battery. We hope you enjoy. And it's over an hour long, so sit back and enjoy and learn some fun things about Noble and the history of the Brahman breed.
We'd like to welcome all of our guests back to another episode of the Over the Hump Podcast. I'm your host, Keaton Dodd. With me, obviously, is Brandon and Rachel Cutrer, and today we've got a special treat for y'all. We're going to tell the story of, the most influential animal, most definitely in the BRC program, but lots of programs worldwide. We're going to tell the story of Noble, and so we'll don't even really know where to start. There's so much to cover, but I guess we can just jump right into how that even came about, Brandon. And could you tell us who approached who, the partnership with John, and how Noble even was created, if we wanted to start there?
Yeah, so the way I remember it, back early on when Rachel and I were married, from time to time I would do a little day work for different ranches around the area and kind of getting to know people. And one of those ranches was John Locke. They're at Hudgens at the YL division, and I'd spend a little time over there helping them work cows and this and that, and kind of getting to knowing their cows and getting to know John, and just kind of built a pretty good relationship. And one day we were just talking, and John I always loved the Elmo bull. And from the time I saw him as a calf and the time that he showed, and then at that time he was getting into some of his early calf crops, and those calves were just fantastic. And also knew about his fondness and close relationships with a lot of breeders in Australia. And one day we were just kind of sitting and talking. He said, you know what, if we could just make a bull like Elmo and make him polled, we could put our kids through college, and just from Australia. And I said, well, we got those really good polled cows. And at the time, we had just had national champion with 100/7, which was Rachel's and I's first national champion after being married. We had the 510/6 cow, who was 100/7's mother. We had 98/6, who's kind of the matriarch of our polled program, who made so many herd bulls for us. But just those cows themselves made lots of herd bulls, and have had a huge impact just within the polled sector of the Brahman deal. And John said, you know what, that's not a bad idea. He said, he said, Elmo's my best bull. He said, what do you think is your best cow? And at the time I was like, 100. 100 is my best cow. He said, I tell you what, let's just work some of those cows and do a partnership on these flushes, and let's work them to Elmo. And I was like, yeah, that's awesome. So the deal was, any bull calf that was born, we would own half interest together at the time of birth. And then Rachel and I got any heifers that were born. So I'm like, yeah, that's a great, fantastic idea. So we went to it, and I think the first cow we flushed to Elmo was 510. And resulting from that, we've got 279 out of that flush. And he was polled, and he was a nice bull, and we ended up selling him in one of our internet sales for quite a bit of money at the time to Southern Cattle Company. And so we ended up owning that bull at the time, a quarter Rachel and I, a quarter John, and then half Southern Cattle Company with Mr. John Downs. And that was a great partnership. And that bull went on to be, make huge impact on the polled side of things. Well, the next cow we did was 100 over 7. And when we did that, I think we ended up with 2 or 3 embryo pregnancies. And if I remember correctly, there were 4, because there ended up being 3 bulls and 1 heifer, and 2 heifers, excuse me. So there were 5 pregnancies. And one of the heifers, because I remember one of the heifers died at birth, but then the other heifer went on to be the mother to the 788 over 7 bull that we sell semen on, and has done a nice job and low birth weight and all that kind of stuff. And then there was a bull 453 that was born the same time as Noble, because Noble is 458 over 7. And we ended up selling that bull to Merida, Mexico. And so I think that bull has made a huge impact in that program down there. And I think the next bull, which was a frozen embryo and born at a later time, was 733, who La Muñeca now calls Polled Phenom. And so he was a scurred bull who's made a huge impact in a lot of polled programs as well. And then there was Noble, and Noble came out horned. And but from early on, he was a super calf, lots of bone, lots of muscle, and so far early on, he was so impressive that's kind of how we got into our partnership with Sam Sparks on that bull, because I think Sam was out riding around with me one day, and Noble.
Oh, sorry. I was like, that's not exact. I remember it that way, but you might remember this detail. But at some point, there was a birthday card that you gave me that said we were going to flush, that I was getting some semen on Elmo for my birthday. Do you remember this?
Yes, I do.
And I was like, this is more of a birthday present for you than a birthday present
It sounds
for
like
me.
he played you and he bought himself a birthday gift.
Yes.
Okay, since this was 12 years ago, I think I can come clean. And your birthday kind of snuck up on me at the same time that we had made this deal. And I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? So I don't think John and I hadn't completely hammered out the deal yet. And so I was like, oh, I got a great plan. I went and got a birthday card and wrote it on the birthday card that I got you a deal to flush your pole gals. And so, at the time I thought it was smooth sailing, but I think you saw right through that pretty early on. So,
No,
let's bring that out where everybody knows now.
In fairness, it turned out to be a pretty good gift. I'll kick this your direction, Rachel. What's your first memory of Noble? Before we get into talking to Sam, what's your fondest or first memory of kind of seeing that bull as a baby?
Well, I should say that, like, on the paper, the breeder says me, Rachel Cutrer, because it is out of my cow. But honestly, I had the least to do with this because it was all John and Brandon. So they orchestrated all of that, and I just get a lot of the credit for it. But it would have been, the whole process. And Brandon, you left this out, but also at that time you were day working for the Locks, but we had like a weekly tradition of meeting up at Los Cucos.
Yep, that's right.
Once a week with John. But I was trying to think back to this because this all would have been occurring maybe like in 2012. And I know that Molly was born, like it would have been like 2011, 2012, because Molly was born, but that was when Selena was working so many nights. And a lot of times, remember, her parents would have had all of John's kids. And so it would be like you, me, John, and Molly eating at Los Cucos every week. And then that was kind of when some of this talk all, occurred.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thinking back now, there's so many details that are starting to flood back in that I had forgotten.
Yeah. No, I mean, so I would say my first memories were this birthday card where I was kind of mad. And then
I think
like
I remember your quote of "You're just checking boxes," and not putting a lot of thought into this.
that it was sitting across from John at Los Cucos, like with a bowl of tortilla chips over us, like just talking about this big idea that we had to partner up on, 100 and Elmo at the time.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
yeah.
let's move on before we get into too many more of my mishaps as a husband and my
Before Brandon
shortcomings.
is on the couch tonight. I guess, Rachel, at this time, this would be as good a time as any to get into the Sam Sparks portion of this.
Yeah. So we sold Noble. Brandon, you said at 2 months or something, and we've
That's
always
3 months old as I remember.
3 months old.
Yep, and
We were we've talked about this a lot, but I think it would be cool if we could actually call Sam and get Sam's side of it. If y'all are cool with that.
That would be
I think that'd be
fantastic.
wonderful.
Let's get him on.
He's been a huge part of this story.
Let me see if I can call him real quick.
Hey, good morning.
Hey, Sam. Hey, morning. So it's Rachel, and not to put you on the spot, but we are recording this podcast that's like the story of Noble, and we have all heard Brandon's side of it, but we thought it would be cool to hear your side of the day you bought Noble, if you remember that.
I do.
Yeah. Would you be willing to share it on the podcast?
Absolutely.
Okay, go. Go for it.
So I was just looking to introduce some new genetics into our herd, and in visiting with one of our close friends in the Valley, Danny Acevedo of Double A Ranch. He recommended that I take some time to go visit with Brandon at V8. And so I called Brandon, and we set up a time for me to come visit, look at the cattle, and see if we could find something that would best fit our needs. And so I drove up one morning. It was I left the valley early in the morning, got to V8 probably mid-morning sometime, and immediately hopped in with Brandon in the side-by-side, and we started riding around, looking at calves. And we came up on an oak tree that had a couple recips with some calves around it, and Brandon pointed out Noble almost immediate into the trip, and was really praising the bull. He told me that Brandon thought that he was the best bull calf that had been born on the ranch since Brandon had been there at V8. I do remember that. And so, of course, he stuck out like a sore thumb. He definitely was a standout of the group, but didn't price him, didn't say he was for sale at the time, just kind of really wanted to praise the bull and point him out. And so we kept riding around. I picked out another polled skirt bull that I wanted to buy, picked out 2 heifers. We actually crossed paths with Mr. Sloan while we were riding around the ranch, and Brandon told Mr. Sloan that he had shown me the bull, and Mr. Sloan even confirmed that he was a really, really nice bull calf, was excited to see how he was going to turn out. And then later on, we went to lunch and talking about the cattle that we had seen that morning. And the whole time I was there, I just felt like, I was with some really genuine people. Like it wasn't a sales trip. They were there really praising the cattle and their hard work and efforts. And so I just felt like I was getting an honest opinion of the cattle that I had seen. Worked out a deal with Brandon on the bull calf, the polled skirt bull, and the 2 heifers. And then I started my trip home. And I made it all the way from Wharton to the King Ranch. And that bull just stuck in my mind. I couldn't, from everything that everyone was saying about the bull, to what I seen with my own eyes, I just couldn't get the bull out of my mind. And so I called my wife and I told her about my trip, told her about the bull, called my father and told him about the bull. And then I called Brandon back and I said, "Hey, Brandon, let's talk about that bull that you showed me, the 458 bull." And he told me about the bull and about how he was bred and about how Brandon and Rachel were in partners with John Coleman Locke on the bull. And it just, everything, all the stars just seemed to line up in my mind on trying to make a deal on the bull. And so Brandon offered me an interest in the bull, and that's how it went down.
So I'm like choked up. I'm just going to say I'm like choked up right now, just claiming that. But that bull at the time, he would have been like 3 months old. He was still on the cow.
He was still on the cow. Yes, ma'am. He was.
And I like how you are referring to him at this stage of his life as 458, because at that time, that's what his name was. You know, he wasn't noble yet.
That's correct. Yes, ma'am.
Brandon, does that align with your memory?
That's exactly right. I remember the oak tree he was standing under and where we were at when we saw him together. Kind of the way the sun was shining on him. That's an image that's been burned into my mind. I can still see it all as clear as day. Sam sitting right beside me, and just Noble standing there in front of us, and it was just wonderful. And I remember when Sam called me back and said, "Hey, let's do something on that bull." I was like, "Oh man!" I was hoping to forget about that.
I remember that too, and it sounds like Sam was using some hard negotiation strategy because he had just said he had bought 4 other animals. So we were all very gracious for that business, and then he like slides in with the real offer of Noble.
Yeah. I'll have to admit it wasn't cheap, and for a calf as young as he was, it definitely wasn't cheap. And especially considering that bull's age, I kind of felt a little bit guilty about it, but I didn't necessarily want to sell an interest. But I priced him, and I was like, yeah, maybe that'll scare him off a little bit, but it did not. And so we worked out that deal. But I think it. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sam, but I think that deal's, even though it was a big investment at the time, is probably paid off in dividends over and over.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. I do very much so remember how you priced him. I was a little caught off guard at the time, but really just couldn't get over the look of the bull and how everyone was praising him. From what I saw with my own eyes to everyone confirming just how he was put together at such a young age, it was just really hard to walk away from.
Yeah, we have a picture. We've shared it before of Noble still, on the cow, but I'm going to put that in like the blog post so people can see that, like, what he was looking like at that time. And so then do you remember when he got the name Noble? We know you named him, and we want to definitely hear that, but he was already showing at that point, I think, right?
Yes, ma'am. He had already been shown. If I remember correctly, I think he had already won at San Antonio, and or maybe it was just before, but I do remember we talked about coming up with a name for him because he was a special bull, and you reached out to me and asked me if I had any ideas. And for whatever reason, Noble just seemed to really stick in my mind. And so that's when I suggested Noble.
Mm-hmm. I definitely remember that because you had said Noble to me was a very different name. A lot of times people have names that are like, based, well, even us, we have names that are based off of music or, popular movies or buzzwords at the time. But when you said Noble, it was just such a, I guess, astute name. It was just such a powerful name. And we were like, yeah, that sounds great. And Yeah, it really fit him. It fit his personality and his life, Yeah. Aw, that was good. Anything else you really remember or want to reminisce about?
I would say just the partnership has really been something special. To have such a remarkable partnership for this long of a period of time.
Yeah.
Over the best bull in the breed, it's really it's been a phenomenal ride for us. Noble, of course, put SRS on the map when it comes to Brahman cattle. We love it when people come to our place to visit, and they know that we have Noble genetics in our herd, and it's fun to see them point out cattle in our herd and say, well, I bet that's a Noble one. Of course they're right. It's really neat to be a part of.
We have had a wonderful partnership. I don't think we've ever had a problem in 10 years, and we always have had fun together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, well, thank you, Sam. Thank you for taking this call, Sam, and telling that. I know people will like to hear it.
Yes, it's been great.
All right. Okay. Well, we'll talk to you later. Thank you.
Sam, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Okay. Bye. Oh, that was so good.
That was really neat. It's always good to hear, even the oak tree, because it takes me to a place and I can see little Noble standing under a tree, and so that is awesome. Well, we could talk about the story of Noble forever, and I know that bull's top 1% of the breed for so many traits. One of those traits, he's top 1% of the breed, and I would say he probably had as much of an impact on Brahman cattle in this area, docility. But the irony of the docility is Noble and Brandon's interesting relationship as he started to show. So we tell some of those stories, or talk us through early days of Noble getting kind of halter broke and showing.
Over the years, Noble and I have come to form a good professional working relationship. And as a calf, we had a really good relationship. But there's a reason why that bull, I would say, hated me. And it was right after his first outing at San Antonio. That was his first show we ever took him to. And
Brett Barber was the judge?
Brett Barber was the judge as a calf he was a March-born calf, and he showed in San Antonio in February. So he was almost right at 11 months old. And that was his first show ever, right before Houston and all that kind of stuff. And he ends up winning his class, winning his division, and coming up and being reserve grand champion over the whole San Antonio Open show, which was wonderful. But up until that point, I'd been practicing him at home and all that kind of stuff. Well, during that show, he started this thing where when you walked him up to set him up, he would immediately start backing up. So you never could get him set up. And there's one picture of him as a calf in the arena where he's like leaning back. Well, he was starting to go backwards. Good thing about it is Brett Barber is such an astute cattleman that he was able to pick up that quality as the bull's on the move, which is a good way to do it. But even realizing that the bull was backing up and not standing still, that he was a good one. And so I've always admired Brett for being able to pick one not only that young and see the future in him, but being able to pick one that wasn't necessarily acting the best at the time. Well, the thing was that I was so mad at the time the way that bull was just backing up. He wasn't trying to get away, nothing, just started backing up and wouldn't stand still. And I was like, I know I got a good bull and a fantastic bull, but I can't get him shown. So after we got home, I was like, it's one of those days the mood hit me right where you gonna learn today. And so I formulated a plan.
It was a Sunday afternoon. I remember. It was a Sunday afternoon.
Yep. And I formulated a plan, shared it with Kolten, and Kolten was like, I don't know about that, man. And I was like, yeah, it's gonna work. It's gonna work. So at the time there was, in some of the turnout pens, there was some electric fence. And so while I would be out there practicing, that bull would start backing up again. And I was getting just madder and madder. So I made it where when I would walk the bull and set him up, I would set him up perpendicular to one of those electric fences. And where when he'd start backing up, he would back into the electric fence and it'd touch him and then we'd go on. And I was like, couple of times that he won't do that no more. The first time it went through and it worked perfectly. And I was like, oh, yes. He jumped up, went back in place, and he stood still for a few seconds. Then he started doing it again, and he did it a second time, and he jumped back up in place and went right back down. I was like, this is working. I was feeling like a hot shot. The third time he backed into that fence, he shot off like a rocket, rolled me right over the top of me. Not only I must have been holding the show halter differently at the time, because not only did the charge hit him, but it hit me too.
You
And
deserved
so
it.
the jolt from being hit by the electricity got me and him at the same time. He runs over the top of me and drags me across the yard. And from that day on, he hated my guts. And I couldn't even brush him after that. But, everybody else still could, but I couldn't. So the come to Jesus meeting that we had that day backfired, and he showed me.
Yeah, nothing like that Sunday afternoon for a come to Jesus meeting, and I'm not sure who really got come to Jesus in that situation.
Yeah.
So, Rachel, what was your recollection of that moment?
Of that, by this point we had already sold Noble, remember, for a premium price, and this was his first show that we were taking him out to. And I remember being very excited that Brett Barber was the judge, because I knew Brett very well from Michigan State, and I thought at that time extremely highly of Brett as a judge, as I still do today, as just a judge that is a stockman who can see cattle, and so we were excited. We were really excited about taking our entire show string to, show under Brett. And throughout the day, he was hammering on our cattle. I mean, we were getting rolled. And I just remember thinking, like, man, is like Brett mad at us, or what's going on? And then I looked back at those show results today. It was 2013 San Antonio. We had nothing. The only thing that won was Noble, and Noble was calf champion, and he was division or class winner, calf champion, and reserve grand champion. And I remember at the backdrop, Brett said to me, he was like, man, this is a good bull. He was like, this bull's going to be something. And I'm like, yeah, I think he is too. And he said, I was wanting to use you all day, but you didn't bring me anything that was worthy of winning until you brought in this bull. And I was like, oh, wow. But it was kind of an eye opener for me too, because Brandon and I talked about that like, hey, look, maybe the general type of cattle that we were associated with at that time is not the direction we need to be going. Because I don't know if you've ever felt that as a judge. It was like he really was wanting to, he wanted to use our cattle, but they just weren't good enough, other than Noble, or use the cattle we had at the show, but other than Noble. And he was like, I love this bull. This bull's going to be something. And lots of times throughout the last 15 years or so, I've shared with Brett all the success of Noble, because he was the first guy that used him, as a baby at his very first show. I mean, it was awesome.
So we talked about Brandon and his relationship with Noble. And so, Brandon, you would have shown him at San Antonio, correct? And then
that was the only time I ever showed him.
And then I actually, this was new history to me. I remember from the Facebook post the other day, that bull then went to Brandy, correct? And so Brandy Barnes showed him.
We knew that Noble was an outstanding show bull, but we had this problem with him and Brandon. It wasn't working, and so we felt like as a team, Noble was maybe a bull that was not going to respond to like tough love type management, that maybe he would respond to like a kind, sweet style of management. And that's when we had the idea to send him to Brandy, because she really, takes care of those animals and like truly loves them. She's loving on them and petting on them. And so we were like, hey, maybe this like sweet style of management might be best for Noble. And so she took him and she showed him for probably a good solid 2 years. Wouldn't that be right, Brandon?
Right. Normally kind of in his division, being and doing pretty good. She had a lot of success with that bull.
So Brandy hauled him around for a while, and then when did Kolten come into the picture as far as Noble?
So Kolten showed Noble the last year at the national show in the fall. That was when Chad Breeding was the judge, and I think Noble was reserve senior champion. And then he showed him his last year at Houston.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Do you think we should call Kolten?
If you think you'll answer, I'd say that would be great insight.
Let me see if we could call him. Because I want to talk about the last year Noble showed at Houston. Well, and just everything.
Yeah.
Kolten.
Yes, ma'am.
Hey, it's Rachel. So I think you used to do this to people, but we are recording a podcast about Noble. And we were wondering if you might be willing to share some of your stories about Noble.
You bet. You bet.
What the topic we were talking on now was the topic of Noble versus Brandon hating each other. and then basically he went to Brandy and then coming back into your barn and like you showing him at Houston.
Yeah.
Can you pick it up from there?
Pick it up from there or pick on Brandon?
Pick wherever you want to start.
We've already had one Brandon roast fest already, so let's just keep it going.
Oh, well, just to throw in the deal on Brandon, getting his work in during Noble's feeding time when he was a growing boy probably wasn't the best for their friendship. Noble would be hangry and Brandon would be determined, and it just didn't work out too well. But at Houston, we were having a very special Houston, and it gets a little harder whenever we get to the grand finale, and if you've had a good day, for the judges to let you continue to have a good day because they don't want people to scream politics. And I felt like that bull looked better than he ever had. I felt like he actually showed good. And the 3-man judge system, there was some that decided we should be the winner and some that did not, and that was extremely disappointing.
I feel a little animosity in your tone there.
Y'all got over it faster than I did, to be real honest.
Sounds
like somebody's keeping receipts over there.
So I mean, there was so much about that, but I don't know if the preparation started like in January, but there was a immense amount of preparation that we were grooming that bull for Houston, because that would have been the first bull we had worked on together, probably that we thought had a solid chance to be a contender,
Right.
Remember, I mean, was Pete, especially you, Pete, me, Molly, Brandon, sort of, we were all every day, just working that bull, getting him ready.
And he did the things he needed to do to look. That was probably the most disappointing. Like, we put a lot of pressure on him and we asked him to do a lot of things with the feed bucket, with his attitude.
Yeah.
And he did them all.
He did. I remember before I can't remember how we had been placed in during the day, but it was probably about the junior-ish, maybe the second division. And Nana, Molly, she wanted that bull to win so much. And she was so nervous because of how he acted, and we already talked about how him backing up. And once he started backing up, you couldn't stop him, and Nana was like, she slipped like a $20 bill in my pocket or something. And she said, you walk over there to Brandy Barnes and you just slip this in her pocket and ask her if she'll just come stand by the bull to keep him calm. Do you remember that? She was like, just go ask her if she'll just stay by the bull, because you were going to show him. So I did.
I tell you, Randy did we didn't have anything else but his like slow down juice.
Yeah.
Her regimen was different than anything we'd ever done, and she had him like she knew that bull, how he responded, when he needed to respond, and she had him.
She did. Well, then, so you were standing out there. It was a 3-man judge system. You were standing out there. I mean, I can picture it today. And you got second. It flashed it up on the board, that you got second. Did you know that you were going to get second? Or did you think you were going to win?
I had no thought that I was going to get second. I was worried about it, but the bull was showing so good.
He did.
That I was like, this is happening. Like it is going to happen.
This is fixing to happen.
Correct me if I'm right or wrong, but he did win on some cards, right? So it was 3-man panel, obviously. Kolten, can you tell us how that kind of shook out?
Yeah, so the foreign judge had him winning, loved him. I think may have cried a little when he didn't win.
Wait, I thought Blake Nelson had him first. I know who had him second. I do know that.
We never let him forget it either.
Yeah, it may have been. I don't know. I just know that mine and Mosby's friendship got fractured after that.
I know. We still tease Paul about that. But you know what? I got to say, as I have gotten older, I'm like, Paul, I respect you, because if you truly thought, that's how the bull should have been placed, then you deserve to place it the way you felt. You shouldn't use your friends unless it's close, right? But
and I respect you for that mindset, but my even though I also respect his decision, I would like to respectfully tell him that he was wrong, considering what the bull has done since then.
Yeah.
And immediately thereafter.
Yeah. Is there any certain things that you remember like the most fondly about Noble, or the least fondly?
I secretly liked that he didn't like Brandon, because that meant that I would have a chance to show him.
Yeah.
I remember going out, and whenever you would go to feed him, and I think I have a picture of it, like on those foggy mornings, he'd be looking at you. He just looked so majestic and incredible and just overwhelming in mass and everything else. He was so fun to feed and to go work with every day. Then the bullfight, when he kills the other bull, that gave me a heart attack and took years off my life.
That's another Noble story. That's when his name became Orca, right? He was a killer whale.
After a killer whale. I remember that. I forgot about that, but that is exactly right.
He got into a fight with his pen mate, right?
Yep.
And killed him?
Yeah.
Yep.
They had been together forever.
As a show bull. Like, this was while he was still in the show barn. Yeah.
Yeah, and they had gotten to a size they probably needed to be separated, but they'd never had a problem. But that morning, they sure did it.
Yeah. The scary thing, it could have been the other way around just as easily.
Yeah.
I never thought about that. Yeah. Well, gosh, we know you're busy, Kolten. I thought it would be cool to talk about that.
Yeah. My other favorite Noble stories is just, what he did first rattle out of the box ever since then. He's literally a bull that changed the course of Brahman history.
Yeah, he has.
Yeah, that very first calf crop, he came out the gate swinging.
Yeah. Good times. Well, all right, we're going to let you go. We love you. All right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Brahman breeders know. You want the finest herd? You have to start with the finest Brahman bull semen. And there's no finer selection than at BRC Ranch. Our champion makers are exactly that, but we know variety is essential. We also offer semen from low birth weight bulls, polled/scurred bulls, and sexed heifer semen. BRC Ranch works to release orders within 3 to 5 business days, but you can always stop by the ranch to pick up your order too. Bring the top Brahman sires to your ranch. Go online to shopbrcutrer.com.
We need to share that picture because, Brandon, do you remember who was the bull that won that class? I know it was a Hudgens bull, but I can't remember which.
Jacob 678.
So Jacob 678 was was he the grand champion that day?
I believe that's right.
He did win Houston that day.
So Noble got, I can't even remember all this, but Noble got second and he did not get reserve senior champion.
I don't remember what would have been reserve senior champion. I think it may have been another big Hudgens bull.
I think it was too.
Should have been right. Yeah.
It's interesting. Well, I don't know where exactly to kind of go with the chronological stuff of this, but Noble was a very popular bull at that time because so many people had bought semen on him. And so a lot of people were rooting for him because they were hoping they, could get semen on the champion bull.
Yeah.
And we have that picture. I've got a picture I'll put in the show notes too. That was the line. I think it was the senior division lineup. And I believe it was 3 Hudgens bulls that had won all their classes. And then Noble was the second place of the oldest division, oldest class.
Yep.
And he really stands out, as just very different.
Yeah, he definitely stuck out in that group.
Yeah. We've talked about it, just us having conversations around the dinner table about that particular class. And you've studied back at the picture now. Do you still have the same feelings that you had at one point in time about just how Noble ended up in that class specifically?
So you, Brandon?
I think it really and truthfully, if I'm being honest with myself, I think it could have gone 3 or 4 different ways that day. And it was a whole lot closer than what it was in my mind at the time, because I think there was probably a little bit of barn blindness going on, and being a younger breeder and all that kind of stuff. But now the older I am and looking at that picture that you're talking about, I'm okay with that.
For years, I ridiculed Paul in a friendly way. We were never mad at each other. We were never, ever mad, but I always sort of blamed Paul for him getting second because I'm like, if you would have put him first, he would have won, But then as I have started judging shows now, I don't know that I would have used Noble. I probably would have put him second just because he was so different.
Yeah.
There's been a couple of times, like when I was judging in other countries, I felt like I was in this same scenario. There was one actually at the Mexico National Show, I think last year, that I was judging in the bigger classes of bulls or in the older classes of bulls. And Chapapote had just a gorgeous, moderate framed, really thick bull. And I loved that bull. And then there was another bull that was, it was larger framed, really high performance. And I said to myself in my head, this is Noble's class 2016. And what are you going to do, Rachel? Because you've been mad at Paul Malsby for nearly a decade for using the more moderate framed bull. But when I was out there and it was me that had to put my name on the card or whatever, I used the Chapapote moderate frame bull. But the other bull second. Well, I later found out after the show, it was a Noble son. And I ended up making that bull reserve, because they were different. They didn't match up, but I thought that bull could, just like Noble, that bull could make a big impact, so it's a little different, when you're judging versus sitting in the stands. And 2 things I guess I remember about that show is that Brandon, as the owners of Noble, there was a lot of hype about Noble, but we were very at peace for whatever whatever was going to happen. Do you remember it like that? We had talked like, whatever happens, this is in God's hands. If he's meant to win, he's going to win. Yeah. If he's not meant to win, that's fine too, because we've got some good bulls coming down the lineup in the future, and maybe this is just not the time, And And so I remember being disappointed, but not devastated. And then I also feel like it just goes to show people that you don't have to be necessarily a champion show bull to change the breed.
Yeah, there's been plenty of those over the years that have come through and weren't successful or in showing or never even showed at all and had a huge impact.
Yeah, I mean, I can name many Houston champions, even, kind of in the last 20 years or so, that didn't amount to anything as far as
that's true too. That's the flip side of that
progeny,
No, absolutely. Well, it's really, really hard to win in the show ring, and I know that's a challenge, but I think as soon as that bull, stepped out of the ring, a new challenge, well, actually, I guess it would have taken place earlier that week. It's even harder maybe to market a bull and get semen distributed all across the globe. And it was kind of a new concept on how y'all sold semen on Noble. So, Rachel, you want to just walk us through how that completely
Yeah, definitely. So, again, in most of the things that we do, a lot of it is influenced by the stage of life that we are in at that time. And so this around 2016, Noble's last year. So Molly would have been 5 years old, and she was into American Girl dolls. I don't know if we have any American Girl doll fans out here. These things are super expensive. And Molly was obsessed. And so an American Girl doll, they have this doll of the year. And every year they come out with a new doll, and it's basically their way of making you spend $150 to get the doll of the year, or girl of the year is what it's called. And we were sitting around one day and we were like, this is such a great marketing plan or whatever. We should apply this to cattle. And so we came up with a new concept of the quote bull of the year. And also, 2016 time, there was a lot of sentiment in the breed of people griping and complaining, saying that it's not fair, you can't get semen on the best bulls. And, that was directed at some of the larger breeders who didn't sell semen in the USA, and people were always whining about it. And so Brandon and I thought, well, let's just break this stereotype. We're like, what would be so bad if we sold semen on Noble and everybody got it? And so we kind of came up with this idea of the bull of the year and selling semen on Noble, but who was our best bull at the time, but we felt like it should be at a premium. And so around that time, the going rate for semen was $50 to $100 a straw. And so we said, we're going to price this bull at $1,000 a straw. 10 times basically the amount what anybody was willing to pay, what people were paying at that time. And really, you would know, Keaton, from club calves, from other breeds, but $1,000 a straw at that time was unheard of.
That's a lot of money. In most breeds, that'd still be a lot of money.
Yeah. And so we said, all right, let's do it. And if people are willing to pay that premium to get the quote best bull we have at the time, then we'll be happy and they'll be happy. But if they don't want it, then that's on them too, So we had came up with this marketing plan to kind of launch this about 2 weeks before Houston. And we came out with a price point, $1,000 a straw. And I remember that John Downs was at the ranch. John Downs from Southern was at the ranch maybe the week before Houston. And Brandon, you might recall, but you kind of pitched this idea to him that we were going to sell it $1,000 a straw, limit 5 per person, right? Yep. And immediately John Downs was like, I'll take 5.
Yeah, because like you were saying, the sentiment of the breed, most of them were like, we just want the opportunity, at it. And so even though it was at a high price and a premium price, the opportunity, just people started jumping on board at that. Because I tell you, when I first pitched it to him, I was like, well, here's going to be the tester. And he's either going to laugh at me or something, or cuss me. Of course, Mr. Downs would never cuss anybody because he's such a wonderful man. But he's either going to chew me out or just laugh at me or something. But he jumped on it and said he was glad for the opportunity to just have the chance.
He said, put me down for 5.
That's right. He went to the
was a lot of breeders who did. I mean, that first year when we were offering him at the $1,000 price point, there was maybe 50 to 60 units that were sold in the USA.
That's right. And one of those I remember very distinctly.
I know who it's going to be.
Wesley Yannick.
Yes.
And he walked up there with his grandmother. And at the time he was young. Now he's a very accomplished professional.
He might have been 15 at the time.
Young, and walked up with his grandmother and made the deal for 5. He went to the max as well. And I think
shaped his program too.
Yeah, ended up having a reserve champion at Houston and made some big sales and really helped build his program. I couldn't be prouder of him,
That's the one that sticks out to me too.
Yep.
But there was, so when we did that, it did a lot of things, but it created a huge fan club for Noble, because all these breeders from small breeders to big breeders, they all had an invested stake in Noble now, and they wanted him to win because, they may have had a chance to, get Semen on a potential Houston champion bull, which he didn't win. And I do remember kind of feeling like we had maybe let those people down a little bit. I don't know if you felt like that, Brandon. But they didn't, because, obviously what they got, it didn't let them down. But another thing I kind of remember about that is I would say it was one of the first big pre-judging, what's the word I'm looking for? Promotions that was done on that bull, and I definitely believe in karma, and maybe this is why the bull didn't win, because we had put so much hype into him before the show, but if you remember, we had this video. Do you remember this, Brandon? We came out with this video that was like, Noble is the greatest bull we've ever raised. It was all this propaganda about Noble, and it was scheduled to come out like 2 weeks right before Houston, which, I mean, obviously, yes, it was for marketing purposes, but in full transparency, you're also kind of hoping that some of the judges see this and get a little preview of this bull. And that had not really been done at the time. Now it's done literally before every show, but I don't like that really. I think it's kind of tacky. If you look at us, we don't put a preview out of what we're taking to the show, and some people do, and that's fine. And it's not with any ugly intentions, but it truly is just to showcase what you have. But I don't think it's right to, try to be like influencing the show.
As time's gone on, as breeders and promoters ourselves, that we've also matured. At the time, early on, we're so excited to have it. We want everybody to know, and we want to do good. But then as you go, and mature, I think sometimes taking a little more humble approach might be a little better.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm glad with everything we did about it, but in retrospect, maybe that was God's way of saying, y'all need to tone it down. You need to be more humble, And I think we've, like you said, we've matured, and we've kind of taken we don't really take that approach anymore. Our approach is our cattle are good and they're ready and they're prepared for the show, and the judge can see them, when they walk in the ring. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I'm just thrilled that I get the opportunity to talk with both of y'all about such a legendary bull. Looked it up this morning just to do justice by Noble, and and this is strictly just in the United States, 884 progeny registered with the ABBA. So I guess that's an amazing fact. But as we kick it back, what's y'all's recollection of like those first Noble calves, and when did you start to really realize that we've kind of got something here?
Me personally, I would say right out the gate, I remember the very first cow I flushed him to was just kind of a mid-level cow that we had, and it was a Hudgens cow. 602/1 was her number, and in that flush, I think we had 5 calves, and one of those calves ended up being just like a mascot for us. His name was Buddy, and if I'm not mistaken, his number is 423. I think there were 2 other bulls in that deal. No, there were 5 total, 3 heifers and 2 bulls. Buddy and his brother, who sold in the internet sale, and then some heifers. I think we sold one of them in an internet sale, kept the other 2. And but I just remember those 5 calves, all 5 of them. Everyone that came around was amazed how gentle those calves were, to the point where at the time, Annie was with me, and she was just learning how to walk, and she could walk in those calves, and she could walk under them. She could pull on their ears and all that kind of stuff. And I've got tons and tons of videos of her running around going, buddy, buddy, buddy. Well, anyways,
Budita. She called him Budita.
yeah,
Remember?
Budita, I remember that.
Budita.
But she loved that calf, and but I just always remember, and even at the time, everyone that came in contact with those calves said, "Man, these are the gentlest calves of any breed I've ever seen." And it wasn't just one; it was the entire flush. And from that time on, we really, between the quality and the disposition, we just started breeding everything to Noble.
Rachel, can you? I guess this would probably be a good time to talk about how he gained international momentum and what was the process of that.
So the international people definitely saw Noble his last year at Houston, and they had been following him, but they saw, they definitely knew him then. And I don't have the semen sales data from that far back, but where his semen sales really took off was like 2019, 2020, but I believe it probably would have been 2017, Brandon. So his first calves were born in 2016. His second would have been 2017. That after Houston, all of the international people that were visiting the ranch were just blown away. But I sort of remember they were, like you said, they were enamored with the fact that Annie was running around all these calves and then the quality.
Yes.
And they kept calling him Noble. They would call it, instead of Noble, they would say Noble. And we noticed it. Do you remember this? We were like, they all keep calling him Noble. And
yeah.
And it was just like a period of maybe that 1 week after Houston 2017 that so many people saw those calves at the ranch, and then he just exploded.
Yeah.
There would be...
I feel like maybe I'm wrong on this, but initially, before the calves were born, a lot of especially Central Americans and South Americans were a little bit hesitant on Noble. They loved his quality and everything about him, but they were hesitant because of his color. He had that little bit of a red hue to him. But once they started seeing those calves and knew that he had the ability to produce those snow white calves that they desired,
that's right.
Or even a red bred to a red, that's when they just jumped in with confidence, because that color will kind of throw them off sometimes.
I do remember that now that you mention it, them asking about the color. Is it going to bother us? Did it bother us? So the first guy that bought Noble semen was actually Hugo Garay. I'm not sure. And he had bought Noble semen when Noble was a 2-year-old bull at San Antonio. Actually, he was there at the show, and he was with Roberto Davila. But that year, about 2017, like I said, the orders just took off, and it would be, people buying, 100, 200, 300 units at a time, just huge orders, which is for me like a breeder's dream. I hear all these stories back in the 80s or, 80s, early 90s when people would come in and buy large amounts of semen and AI, like their whole herd to a bull, but that doesn't really happen too much nowadays. So when people were choosing to do that with Noble, it was just the best feeling, because it was just such validation. And I mean, I know Rodrigo Spigal in Panama has really widespread used Noble across AI, because he'll send me pictures sometimes of like, a pasture full of 50 bulls, and he'll say they're all sired by Noble. Or I know Jairo Bullis of Colombia, he bought a significant amount and has used it across, AI. And that was just a really good feeling. I think I looked it up the other day that we had sold nearly over 10,000 units on Noble. He's our number one semen seller of all time at BRC. Second would be Captain, and then Dutton would be third currently. But, just so many breeders worldwide using that bull.
Yeah, the impact of Noble and what he did on the industry, words can't probably fully tell the story. I mean, like you said, 10,000 units in his lifetime, creeping up on $1 million in sales. what about that bull, I guess, contributions he's not only made to the industry, but what he did for your family, what he did for the brand, what he did to help build this operation, just the impact that that bull had on y'all as a family, if you'd talk about it for a little while.
Well, do you want to talk about that, Brandon, or me? Or
I would almost go as far as saying that without Noble, and probably without Boom Shakalaka and some of those few head, that there probably wouldn't be a BRC, or at least not to the level that you see it today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean,
I tell people all the time, Noble's the bull that built this ranch for us and kind of gave us some validity.
well, I have had been breeding Brahmins for 25 years independently. You had been breeding Brahmins independently for a while too, and then together, you and I, we have been breeding Brahmins together about 14 years now.
Yeah, about that.
Noble would have been one of the first joint projects we bred together, of like talking it out.
It was such a great birthday present.
The birthday present. That's right. But also at the time we were operating with, Dad at his ranch, and our cattle were identified with our R brand, but it was never a situation where people were trying to highlight who the certain breeder was of certain animals. We were all just riding for the brand, basically, and working together, and like Sam said early on, Dad all loved that bull, yes. He loved Noble. And so it was never something that we highlighted, oh, well, this is Brandon and Rachel's bull, or this is a certain person's bull. It was just marketed under, the umbrella of the ranch, which is how I think that it should be, Yeah. But when we started BRC in 2019, and those animals then got separated into their own group of the R branded cattle, I think people could, maybe even at that time, people didn't even know that we had bred Noble. They might not have even clicked that like we were the breeder and owner of Noble, which is fine. Yeah. But when they got separated out and you had those cattle like Noble, like Boom Shakalaka, so back in 2019, I would say that could say that those were the two best Brahman animals in the world at the time. Boom Shakalaka, and I'm not bragging, but they would rank at the top for sure. And we were so blessed to have those. And so if we had not had those animals in bred by us and in the BRC program, without a doubt, we couldn't make it. We couldn't have made it.
That's right.
And we talk a lot about like God's timing of everything, but I look back now and think of all those little things that had been setting up through the past 15 years. And then when 2019 hit and we started BRC, and we're sitting here owning two of maybe the best animals in the Brahman world, that's when it blows my mind of how God's plan can work. It's just hard to fathom.
It's always fun to look back and talk about the people that helped you along the way, but really there's sometimes animals that come along that just literally change your path and change your life. And I think Noble and Boom Shakalaka are both great representatives of that. To kick this in a different direction, so first year I helped BRC at Houston would be 2020. And this is fact. That year, Noble sired every division champion heifer and the grand and reserve champion heifer of the show. And so I think that alone is a testament to just the strength and the consistency that bull offers. But let's just all kind of kick it around between the three of us. What are some of his greatest accomplishments as far as a sire, some of the famous animals that he's generated?
Well, I think that the reserve, I could be wrong, but I think the reserve champion heifer of 2020 that you're talking about was Wesley Onyx, right?
That's right. Yep, that's her.
From that original semen that he had bought.
Yeah, from those semen he bought when he was a little kid, Gosh, well, okay, let's start with bulls. Noble Sons.
Dutton's a reserve national champion.
Dutton, 160. 160.
Yep, hometown.
Y'all are like
There's a-
silent when
There's a
160
lot
is
of
like.
bulls, and but I mean, you had to go down this progeny list just to remember all of them. But there's been so many bulls, there are so many noble sons in production in purebred herds, not here in just America, but throughout the world, Central America, South America, Australia. That bull is just continually making an impact. And I know people have heard me say this before, but all along, I thought Noble was one of those once in a lifetime bulls that you never make again and all this kind of stuff. But what I've come to realize over the years and through his production, almost every calf crop, he himself produces a once in a lifetime type bull. And now we're like 3 and 4 generations past Noble, and the potency of that bull's genetics keep popping through, and every generation seems to be better than the last one. And so, I mean, we have sons and grandsons now that are running around who outproduce Noble tons, and that's the way it should be. But you hate to forget the old man too, because Noble has made such an impact, and he just kind of started with such momentum, and that's really propelled us. And
Well, and red and gray. Like I'm
Yes.
thinking of gray mostly, but there was there a Circle T
Some of those
Melania?
8/9 noble daughters, I think one was an international champion, and then maybe even one of those daughters has gone on to raise an international champion.
And I mean, internationally, especially in the reds, I mean, I know just this year, I think Pedregal in Mexico has a fantastic red noble daughter. Carlos Castillo has a phenomenal noble son that just won, like a couple weeks ago in Panama.
Yep.
There,
Lastra, tons of those people.
yeah, I mean, internationally, I don't even want to start because I don't want to leave anybody out, but Cesar Lastra has a gorgeous noble son, just absolutely gorgeous.
Sigwa Khan has a fantastic noble son.
Yes. Last year, or this 2023 at the Expica Panama, Carlos Lee had a beautiful he's had several beautiful noble daughters, red and gray. If I have to say my all-time favorite noble daughter internationally, it's going to be Carlos Castillo's 150 over 0 cal that won the Expica this year. I mean, I'll put her picture in the notes too, but she is just phenomenal.
Oh,
Just
fantastic
gorgeous.
female. We had the champion of the world this year with Glitter Sparkle, but that cow would have been really, really tough to get around. I was always kind of worried about her.
I think also like Brandon said, he has a calf every year, every calf crop that is better. And I was clicking around on Digital Beef. I was just trying to think like, that's absolutely true. Starting from 2017 to now, every year Noble has given us something phenomenal.
Yep.
I mean, if you look at our show string right now, our oldest bull, show string 2024, Kukui is a noble son.
Yep. Noble is the current reigning champion, get a sire.
Yep. Raised the national champion female.
This year.
Yep.
Well, I'll just throw out a few statistics to kind of back up.
We have left off 2 very significant nobles that I think we need to discuss.
Okay.
Me again, Margaret.
Yes.
And Money Don't Jiggle.
And 240, yes.
I think that's an excellent representation of currently that Noble works. Money Don't Jiggle 240 was just named the Supreme Champion Bull of all American breeds at the Cattlemen's Congress in Oklahoma City. And then me again, Margaret, was the reserve Grand Champion Open female of all American breeds at the Cattlemen's Congress. So if there's anything that describes Noble's strength as a sire, we're 11 years down the road, and he's pumping out the goods.
So I have a question for you guys about that, though, because we were just talking yesterday about how Margaret, as a noble daughter, is a little different than some of the noble daughters we've seen in the past because she's so feminine while still having that power, So if the constant, and then you look at like 160, 240, like some of those more current ones. The constant in all of those equations is noble, but the different is the cows that you're breeding him to.
Yep.
So have y'all adjusted it, what you're going to plan your matings on noble to adapt over time? You get what I'm saying? Like, because Margaret as a noble daughter is very different than Wesley Onyx's noble daughter that won in 2020,
Yeah, I would say yes. So both sexes, Noble's done a fantastic job, especially on the bull side. Just makes big, stout, rugged bulls that's got really masculine heads. But sometimes on the heifer side, if you're not careful, you can almost make them too powerful. And so over the years, getting more time, getting more educated over actual cow production and Bondsma principles and things like that, we've kind of tried to go in a direction of, yeah, we got the power, but now we need to bring back some of that function and productivity and femininity, and we've started hitting it. And so being able to mate that bull with those cows, instead of swinging for the fence every single time and trying to breed more bone, more muscle, we've tried to get a little more, play a little more mating complementarity, I guess, where before we were just going power, and Noble is such an easy bull to do that you can start to abuse it and get them too powerful. And people are like, oh, you can't get them too powerful. And I was like, yeah, when you start ranching these cows, you actually can. So just trying to get back to function, what we found is you start going to more of those refined cows that maybe need a little more power and not necessary to the power cows. That's where the it really starts to gin and do good, because you can make those bulls that are still stout and rugged on those feminine females, but also make the refined females that are super productive and things like that.
Yeah, I would say looking back in our breeding program, we've had some, well, I'm like moving my hand, but people can't see it, like some ups and downs of breeding Noble.
Yep.
Because we bred him a whole lot at the beginning, and then we kind of backed off a little bit, tried some other
those Noble sons. Yeah.
used some Noble sons, and now we're not breeding Noble in volume as much. I guess you would say just more selectively and more targeted.
Yep.
Because you look at 254 and 240. 240 to me is my ideal bull at this time. And he is a Noble son, but he's moderate framed. He's loaded with thickness, masculine breed character, but he's the right frame size, because sometimes the Nobles can get a little bigger.
Right.
And same for Margaret. She's ideal in her frame size, femininity, look, muscle, structure.
Yeah. I think part of that we talked about earlier about growth and maturity as a breeder is realizing where the downfalls are, finding the cattle that complement them, and knowing that, of course, everybody knows their strengths, but not to be blinded by the actual, maybe weaknesses. So just like thinking of Noble in terms of weaknesses, you have to help him on birth weight, because he can make them big birth weight, but he'll just put them at the top of the breed for weaning and yearling. He's not the best in terms of overall marbling, but his tenderness is fantastic. But Noble over the years has become like a feet improver as well as an udder improver. Those daughters have just been fantastic. But every time you breed that bull, you have to think, okay, I got to be careful on the birth weight, got to be careful on frame size, and different things like that. But he's sure going to help me in a lot of other areas.
Yeah, just to throw a few stats, I looked through this morning too. So top 1% of the breed for weaning, yearling, docility, tenderness, and dollar queen. Top 2% of the breed for calving ease, maternal, scrotal circumference, carcass weight, and dollar bull. So that's well over half of the EPD traits. He is in the top 2% or better historically of the breed. Another thing too that I was just kind of piecing together, and Rachel had helped kind of piece this together too. Sire of 3 All-American Grand Champion females, 3 International Champion bulls, 5 international champion or reserve champion females, 4 USA national or reserve national champion females, 3 national champion get a sires, and a Houston champion get a sire. I don't know if you could put together a more impressive resume than that, blending performance with phenotype, but I don't know.
We've talked about this a lot, that we can categorize bulls into an improver, a maintainer, or a detractor, know, and you could name us. I mean, amongst us, we talk about it all the time. You could pretty much throw out any bull in the breed and we can classify him into one of those, and there are certain bulls that are really, what's the word, like not volatile, but inconsistent. You might get one good one and 5 junkers out of it, but Noble is a solid improver and so consistent in everything he produces.
Yep, definitely. I'd agree with that 100%.
No, we talked about, I just read off that list of some of his champions, because if we went into it, we could really spend all day. But I guess what are some of the highlighted winners in the United States? He had an international champion female in 2020.
2020 was a huge year for Noble, like we talked about at Houston that year. Just winning everything. That was, I believe, Pasquale Swanner was the judge, and he got second in the Get of Sire that year. But just winning, dominating that show. And then again, like we talked about, when you look at the timeline of BRC, that was our first Houston where we were exhibiting as an independent ranch. And so to be there with, promoting our new brand, and then the show is just dominated by Noble progeny, not necessarily raised by us though, but raised by other people who had the access to the bull and had the opportunity to use him. That was a wonderful feeling. I mean, that was a wonderful feeling of seeing so many other people doing so well with Noble.
Yeah, and we've spent a big portion of this podcast talking about his show ring accomplishments and all that kind of stuff. Keaton just hit on some of his EPD performance stats a little bit, which he's just phenomenal in. But I would say, when you start thinking about our beef program, Noble was probably the one that helped give us the confidence in his genetics to go with the beef program because of the tenderness. Like I said before, one of his weaknesses was marbling, but those cattle were so much more tender than their contemporaries that kind of got us over that hurdle of when we were starting Brahman country beef. Like, well, yeah, we know a lot of them are marble, but how are we going to handle the tenderness? And so now, because of this huge influence that we have in the BRC program, we don't even worry about tenderness anymore, and we just market that beef like crazy because we have that backed confidence in his tenderness being top 1% of the breed, and that's super accurate because those cattle are fork tender. And then you think about the daughters and their udder quality and how high he ranks in the Dollar Queen Index and the daughters that bull has had. He's been an all-around sire from show ring, of course, but also just practical ranching and beef quality, carcass quality.
Last year, I think it was, I'm still on the bandwagon that Margaret 254 is my favorite Noble daughter that, in the USA, and Carlos's 150 is my favorite internationally. But last year, when we had all the judging teams out at the ranch, y'all remember Margaret would have been a young baby first year, and all those judging team coaches were there looking at her. Mark Hogue especially was like, he brought all his kids around, and he was like, this is it, guys. Like, of any breed, any species, this is the right kind. And then I remember how gentle Margaret is. And he said, like, this heifer is going to go out and make her showman look like a dream, And then I think, as a mom, I think about like Molly and Margaret, how many times they've been showing together, then winning the All-American, winning the national show. So to me, that's hands down my favorite, because it's not just the great cattle, but the good dispositions, the gentleness of those cattle, that it just makes them a pleasure to be around.
Yeah, I've never seen an animal like Margaret that combines refinement, femininity, and power like she does. Yes.
And kindness too. I mean, she's the sweetest
I don't
animal.
really think about that
You know?
part, but I know you and Molly do.
She is just the sweetest, when she gets out there with Molly and she gets her head up and looks so good. I mean, like, you can laugh and say we're WAC, women are crazy, but that's worth a lot too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Noble was born March 17th of 2013, and I think the biggest testament to that bull's strength over the years is we're in 2023, and in 2023 sired the national champion female at both the national and the junior national show, supreme champion bull at the Cattlemen's Congress in the American Division. So we're 11 years post that bull being born, and his impact has obviously been immense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Definitely.
And those are direct offspring, but just think about the 2 and 3 generations behind him there.
He's a grandsire of the national champion bull this year.
Still pumping them out.
Harley Wade said this the other day, that we were just talking about how much we love Noble, and he said he loves Noble. And he said even though he wasn't the breeder of Noble, he wasn't the herdsman for Noble, he loves that bull so much, but he can't wait to see where things are going to be when we can say Noble is 5 generations back or 10 generations back. Like, just to think about how cool it's going to be 10 years from now to see where things are.
I think 10 years from now, we'll talk about his impact. And when we're 5 generations deep, I think the foot quality, the breed character, those performance traits is really what we're going to remember him for 5 generations from now. Well, Rachel?
Well, I think some of our guests will be happy because we've gone over an hour and 20 minutes. People are like, we want more. So
we could honestly probably talk even longer too if we really got into progeny, and at some point I guess this is probably as good of a time to cut off.
We have had this was a good episode. We're going to do more of these, like talking about some of our more, famous animals. I think people like to get to know the stories behind them, not just, the picture.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Well, it's been great, guys. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I truly enjoyed this one.
Well, I've got a birthday coming up.
All of them, but this one rises to the top pretty good.
I got a birthday coming up in January, Brandon.
Let's see. What do you got?
All right.
Just the way just to wrap it all up, the way Noble has helped and blessed our family over the years, and the relationships forged together with other Brahman breeders, and the community that Noble has helped build in working and improving the breeds. It's been a true blessing to be able to be a part of.
I haven't thought of this, not to try to have the last word, but you will remember, Brandon, when all those people in the USA started buying semen on Noble, we said it's like Noble, that we didn't get Noble because of us. We got Noble because of John sharing with us. And then we were blessed with that bull, that we really felt like that bull was such a blessing to us. We wanted him to be a blessing to the entire breed.
Yeah.
And now looking, I think we even said it's like Noble is the people's bull, that everybody could have access to him and everybody could use him. And now looking back in the last 10 years, we definitely accomplished that.
Yeah, I'd agree. He's the kind of bull that makes up breeders look good too. So makes it easy.
Yes. All right. Well, thanks for listening, guys. Hope you all enjoyed it. We'll see y'all next time on Over the Hump. On February 5th, 2024, Noble 458/7 passed away peacefully at his home on BRC Ranch. We are forever grateful for this bull and how he impacted our lives and our ranch and the many ranches around the world that have used him. And we firmly believe that his impact is only going to continue for decades to come.
You've been listening to the Over the Hump Podcast. Our passion is Brahman cattle, and it runs deep. And this show is about its rich history, industry trends, and stories that define the American Brahman. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, find us on Instagram and Facebook at BR Cutrer. See you next time on the Over the Hump Podcast.